Hall today. The public may continue to participate electronically via video conference, and this meeting is also live streaming on youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. The City Clerk staff have connected registered speakers to the meeting, and the list of speakers can be viewed by visiting the General Government Licensing Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I ask for everyone's patience if we experience any delays or technical problems during today's meeting. The City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff will be available for members in the chamber and remotely if you need help with any of your electronic devices today. I'd like to remind everybody when voting on an item or a motion, I ask that members ensure they keep their video on and to raise their hand to indicate their vote. To members of the committee, I'd also like to remind you that we still must submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at gglc@toronto.ca to help with any motions. For our land acknowledgement, I would like to say on behalf of the members of the General Government Licensing Committee, although they were in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also wish to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. At this point, I'll ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. If you do have an interest, if you could please raise your hand or unmute your microphone to let me know. Seeing none, we will proceed with the agenda. Could I have a motion to confirm the minutes of our meeting on April 29th, 2022?
I'll move it.
Moved by Speaker Nunziata. All in favor? And that carries. We're now going to proceed through the agenda. Sorry, just a moment. Got to scroll down here. Our first item is GL 31.1. It's a presentation on annual updates on OMERS as it relates to the city's employee contributions. So I will hold that down for the presentation. Number 2 is our annual update on Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System as it relates to city's employer contributions. There is a recommendation that we receive this for information. Would anybody like to hold this item?
I'll move receipt.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata is moving receipt. All in favor? That carries. Number 3 is amendments to retainer agreement purchase order 6035311 with Osler, Hoskin, and Harcourt LLP for legal services related to pension and benefit issues. Would anybody like to hold this item? Somebody like to move the recommendations, please?
So move, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holiday.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. All in favor? That item carries. Number 4 is our Toronto Fire Department Superannuation and Benefit Fund Funding Valuation Report as at December 31st, 2021. Somebody like to hold this or move the recommendations?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Those carry. Item number 5 is an administrative penalty system for 2021 activity. We're actually going to consider that in conjunction with item number 6, which is the annual report on parking enforcement, parking ticket issuance. I don't know if anybody had an interest in holding either one of those. Could I get somebody to move the recommendation in number 5 then?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. All in favor? That carries. And the recommendation in number 6, please.
I'll
This
move
is the
it.
2021. Thank you, Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations in number 6. All in favor? That carries. Number 7 is Toronto Police Services Antenna License Extension Agreement. We have a report from the Executive Director of Corporate Real Estate Management. Would anybody like to hold this item? If not, could I have somebody move the recommendation?
I'll move it.
Councillor Filion. Thank you, Councillor Filion. All in favor? Number 7 passes. Number 8 is a non-competitive contract with Bloomberg Finance LP for the provision of continued leasing proprietary software and data services. Would anybody like to hold this or move the recommendation, please? All right, I will move the recommendations in number 8. All in favor? That carries. Number 9 is our large multi-passenger pedal vehicles or quadricycles pilot project that was sent back to us from City Council. There's a further report. Would anybody like to hold this item? Somebody like to move the recommendations? Councillor Filion is moving the recommendations.
Mr.
All in
Chair,
favor?
may I have a recorded vote, please?
Yep. So we're having a recorded vote on number 9. All in favor of the recommendations?
Mr. Chair, I see Councillor Ainsley, Filion, Councillor Filion, Councillor Matlow, Councillor Nunziata. All those opposed?
Okay, and those opposed? Sorry, Matthew, that's your job.
All those opposed, I see Councillor Nunziata. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holiday is opposed. Mr. Chair, 4 in favor and 1 opposed. The item is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Number 10 is the 2021 accounts receivable write-off report and write-off of uncollectible property tax and utility amounts. Anybody like to hold this item? Somebody like to move the recommendations?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Number 11 is the 311 Toronto Annual Report for 2021. I'm actually, if nobody would like to hold that item, I'm going to hold it. I have questions of staff. Number 12 is application for approval to expropriate part of 24 Ferrand Drive, Stage 1. Anybody like to move the recommendations in this report?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations in number 12. All in favor? That carries. Number 13 is expropriation of properties for the extension of Beecroft Road, Stage 1 in Ward 18.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Councillor Filion is moving the recommendations for 13. Number 13, all in favor? That carries. Number 14 is a below market lease with operator for childcare services at 38 Monte Kwinter Court in Ward 6. Somebody like to hold this or move the recommendations, please?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations for number 14. All in favor? And that carries. Number 15 is long-term nominal lease with Toronto Condominium numbers 2254 and 2598 at 208R Bloor Street West. There's a registered speaker for that, so I will hold that down. Number 16 is the update on the Jane Finch Community Hub and Center for the Arts and additional terms for the city's acquisition of a portion of 2050 Finch Avenue for Metrolinx.
Mr. Chair, it's Peruzza. Can you hold that down? I think there's also speakers on it, right?
Okay, I will hold that for you, Councillor Peruzza. Thank you.
Thanks.
And number 17, update on improvement to public notices. There's speakers on this. I will hold number 17 down.
Mr. Chair, just
Number 18.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order,
Yes.
If it can be of assistance, I'm going to have some questions on that, and they're specifically to MLS. So if I could just make that note early that when it comes to questioning, if somebody could be available to answer my questions about sign bylaws.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matthew, if you could make sure, I believe Mr. Grant is here this morning. I did see, but I will make a note of that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Sorry, number 18. Supplementary report, no fault grant for basement flooding damages. Speaker Nunziata, I believe you had a motion to defer this?
Yes, I have a motion to defer to the July meeting, July 4th, General Government Licensing Committee. Thank you.
All right, the motion is on the screen to defer this item to our July 4th meeting. All in favor? And that carries. And number 19 is amendment to blanket contract 470217993 with Enterprise Rent-A-Car Canada for short-term vehicle rental services. And we have a recommendation here from the Chief Procurement Officer and General Manager of Fleet Services. May anybody lady like to hold this item or move the recommendations?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holliday.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor Holliday, moving the recommendations for number 19. All in favor? And that carries. And we will go back to the top of the agenda for number 1 is the presentation on the annual update on OMERS as it relates to the city's employee contributions. We have a presentation from OMERS from Joe Panichetti and John Armstrong. Mr. Panichetti and Mr. Armstrong, you can proceed whenever you're ready. And good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. Good morning to you, Mr. Chair, committee members, staff. We're pleased again to attend this morning's General Government and Licensing Committee and provide you with our annual OMERS update. This morning, I'm pleased to be joined by John Armstrong that you referred to just now, Mr. Chair. As you all know, the city's new appointee to the Administration Corporation Board of Directors at OMERS. John and I will be making the presentation, but we're also joined with staff as needed with questions after the presentation. We have Jonathan Simmons, Chief Financial and Strategy Officer for the Administration Corporation, Celine Chiavati, the Executive VP and Head of Pensions Administration for the Administration Corporation, Catherine Preston, the VP of Sustainable Investing, and Pierre Cote, Executive Director, Strategy, Stakeholder Relations with the Sponsors Corporation. Slide 2, this slide that you see now, I'm just going to be providing a very quick overview to start with on OMERS and the City of Toronto membership demographics. John will provide an overview of the 2021 financial results, as well as an update on OMERS commitments and priorities in sustainable investing that I know is very important to the city. And then I'll conclude with an update on Sponsors Corporation priorities and discuss challenges that we see into the future. So to start quickly with the demographics, much of this, many of the councillors have seen before, Mr. Chair. There's 541,000 total members at OMERS, 300,000 round numbers active members. about 188,000 that are retired, and 53,000 deferred members. Regarding the City of Toronto portion, there are approximately 25,000 active members from the city, which is about close to 9% of total active members. But when you add the city agencies and corporations, that brings up another 15,000 active members, another 5% of the total active members. So in total, the City of Toronto and the agencies represent close to 14% of active members. And as outlined in the staff report from Hatem and staff, the City of Toronto active members actually represent about 17% of contributions and 19% of liabilities. The bottom line is City of Toronto, as I think you're well aware, represent a large portion of the OMERS membership and contributions, and that's duly noted, as I said in the report from staff. My final intro slide is an area that you've sought reporting from us on a regular basis. No different than the City of Toronto, OMERS has a very important goal related to inclusion and diversity. We see it as a key to our success, no different than the City of Toronto. The percentage of women on the executive leadership team has increased to 40% since 2019. And in summary, both boards, the Administration Corporation, the Sponsors Corporation, and staff are fully committed to diversity and inclusion. So with that quick overview, I'll turn it over to John now to provide more information on the 2021 results. Over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Joe, and good morning, Mr. Chair, and to all the committee members. Thanks for having us this morning. As Joe mentioned, although 2021 seems like a long time ago now, I am going to give you an overview of the financial results for the 2021 financial year. It was a very strong year for OMERS, and if we could turn to slide 6, you can see on this slide that the net investment return for OMERS in 2021 was 15.7%. That's over $16 billion of investment income, which was brought into the plan in the year. That's also well above the benchmark that we set for ourselves of 6.6%, which translates into a benchmark investment income of $6.5 billion. So well above those benchmarks. And I'm very pleased to tell you that the strong results came from across the portfolio. If we turn to slide 7, this chart shows that the returns from each of our major asset classes exceeded their benchmark. At the bottom of the page, you can see the 15.7 that I just referred to, our actual return, compared to our total portfolio benchmark of 6.6%. You can also see on this page that all segments generated positive returns and all segments outperformed. The public investments earned 14.6% versus their benchmark of 5.8%. The private equity segment earned 25.8% versus a benchmark of 8%. Infrastructure over 10% versus a benchmark of approximately 8%. And real estate almost 16% versus a benchmark of approximately 6%. If I look through a slightly different lens on the next slide, so slide 8, I'm going to highlight the 4 major factors or main factors that drove the outperformance, starting with the 45% above benchmark performance that came from our public equities. This is a high quality portfolio of global names that performed very well in 2021. Moving down the page, private equity, about 30% of the outperformance came from this part of the portfolio. And here, earnings growth across the portfolio, both organic and through acquisitions, is really what drove the outcome. On the real estate side, about 15% of the above benchmark performance came from this asset class, and particularly, as it notes on the page, our industrial real estate portfolio, which saw very robust demand. And when you think about industrial real estate, you really should be thinking about the warehousing and logistics spaces that are supporting the modern approach to distributing goods across the economy, as well as shortening our supply chains. And then finally, infrastructure was the last piece of the puzzle, and that showed continued strong and stable returns from its essential businesses last year. I'm going to turn to slide 9 now, if I could. At OMERS, the youngest member of the pension plan is 16 years old, and the oldest member is 106. So we measure time in decades rather than months or quarters. And looking at our annual returns in isolation wouldn't be enough, because we pay pensions over many, many years. And so we also look at our long-term returns. And on this slide, you can see our returns over a 1, 3, 5, and then shaded in blue on the right side of the page, a 10-year basis. And our 10-year return now sits at 8%. We compare those realized returns to the benchmark returns, which represent the compounded value of the annual benchmarks that we set. And here on this slide, you can see that not only did OMERS beat the benchmark on a 1-year basis, but also on a 3, 5, and 10-year basis. So that additional investment income that comes into the portfolio adds to the value of the assets, grows our funded status, and makes OMERS a stronger pension plan. If I could turn to slide 10, this one looks at the diversification through the lens of our asset classes. We have a return-seeking portfolio of assets that's looking to earn strong and stable investment returns over time. The portfolio is very well diversified by asset class. You can see that about 1/3 of the book is in public equities, and we have significant allocations to credit, to private equity, to infrastructure, and to real estate. And I would also note that you can see on this slide, we're operating with very low leverage at the present time, which affords the plan a significant degree of financial flexibility. On slide 11, if I could, this slide looks at 2 different perspectives on diversification. On the left-hand side, you see diversification by geography, and our geographic exposure is about 29% to Canada, 44% to the United States, 16% to Europe, and that's split roughly 50-50 between the continent and the UK, and then 10% in Asia Pacific. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you see our industry exposure, and I'll just make a couple of points here. Firstly, you'll note that real estate is our highest portfolio allocation at 16%, and this really corresponds to our allocation to that asset class, which you saw on the prior page. And then just 4% of the portfolio is allocated at the other end of the spectrum to the energy sector. Now, slide 12, this is probably my most complicated chart of the day, but I'll try to walk you through it as best I can. But I also think that this is one of our most important slides on the day, because it measures our funded ratio over time and our discount rate, or our funding requirement to meet our obligations in the future. So there's 2 lines on the chart. The first one starts at 86% on the left-hand side of the page, down at the bottom. And then you see it sloping upwards left to right, ending at 97% in the top right corner of the slide. This is our funded ratio. That is the ratio of our assets on a smoothed actuarial basis to our liabilities. So the chart shows that 10 years ago, OMERS was 86% funded. And then over time, we've been able to build up the funded ratio to where it now stands at 97%. And the main driver of this is those investment returns above the benchmark that I just spoke about over the 10-year period, and importantly, above our discount rate or our funding requirement. So the second line on the chart is also really important. That's exactly that discount rate. Over time, we've been seeking to reduce our discount rate. I think you've heard in this forum before that that's something we've been focused on. And if you move from left to right along the chart, you can see that it was at 4.25% for many years. That's the flat part of the second line, if you will. And then the line begins to slope down and to the right. As of today, we've reduced our discount rate to 3.75%. So that's a 50 basis point reduction. And what that means is that the plan is less reliant on income into the future than it was 10 years ago. So funding ratio has increased and reliance going forward on investment income has reduced over the last decade. I'm going to leave it there as it relates to the financial results, but I'll obviously be happy to answer any questions when we get to the Q&A. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, and I'm going to turn to our commitments and priorities in sustainable investing. But first, I want to share with you some perspectives on our overall approach to sustainable investing. So if we could turn to slide 14. So first off, sustainable investing really is core to our investment process. And I can tell you as a member of the investment committee that it does get considerable profile along with many other factors that we look at when making investment decisions. It really is ingrained in the culture, and it's a priority for both the board and also for the executive team. I would say that our approach is at its core rooted in the belief that well-run organizations with sound environmental, social, and governance practices, or ESG practices, will perform better over the long term. And there's really 4 key principles, which you see highlighted on this slide, that we employ. Firstly, integrating ESG alongside other investment criteria, which I just referred to as we do in the investment committee meetings, provides us with a more holistic way of assessing value, opportunity, and risk that will support our return objectives over the long term. And as a large institutional investor, our teams engage with our investee companies to influence their business practices, and in particular, their sustainable business practices. We also recognize that there's strength in collaboration. So we do work with like-minded organizations, and we exchange information, and we seek to amplify our voice as we advocate for better transparency and better performance around ESG factors. And then lastly, this is a rapidly evolving landscape, and we know that we don't have all of the answers and that we are continuing to learn. So we recognize the importance of continuing to adapt as we follow our own pathway on ESG. And then on slide 15, thinking about our priorities and our commitments, we do know that climate change presents a real and present risk and opportunity to the companies that we invest in, as well as to the communities in which we live, serve, and do business. We've therefore set for ourselves an ambitious net zero objective across the portfolio for 2050, which is what aligns with what scientists have told us is required to avoid the most devastating impacts of climate change. We've also taken steps to understand the implications of climate change across our portfolio, using the best industry standards to calculate and report on our position. And this would include, importantly, 2 things I would highlight. 1, computing our total fund carbon footprint on an annual basis. And secondly, evaluating the portfolio's exposure to green assets, which you see highlighted here on this slide. That includes green buildings, solar and wind companies, as well as a manufacturer of green batteries. And that portion of the portfolio stood at $18 billion at year end. I'd also note that the commitments we're making are not just long-term commitments. We've also set a carbon reduction goal of 20% by 2025 to ensure that the leadership team is accountable today, and we will continue to set successive interim targets every 5 years on our pathway to net zero. I'm also happy to be able to report that OMERS achieved a 4% carbon reduction in its first year of measurement. I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'll pass it back to Joe so that he can share with you some perspectives on the sponsor corporation update and priorities. Joe, back to you.
Thanks very much, John, for those insights on the financial results and sustainable investing. Mr. Chair, I'll focus now on the balance of the presentation on the sponsors corporation priorities, with key focus on managing the plan over the longer term. Excuse me, the information in this presentation is very much aligned with the key messages I should elaborate on that are in the 2021 annual report that you can view in detail on our website. But basically, much of our messages are from the annual report. Firstly, a reminder to committee that OMERS has turned 60 this year on April 18th. And our overall objective really hasn't changed over those years. It is the design and delivery of a sustainable, affordable, and meaningful plan, what we refer to at OMERS as SAM. And meeting SAM's objective is, as outlined in this slide, a balancing act. Members want benefits that, rightly so, are meaningfully improve their retirement security. Both members and employers want to have affordable contributions. And sustainability is about finding and maintaining a stable balance between meaningful and affordable, and being able to adjust the balance as conditions change. Decisions about the plan and risk are shared across members and employers. That's the key message I want to leave with you. Our plan relies on a strong partnership between those two groups to deliver on the benefit promise and continue to meet the SAM objective. This next slide is somewhat in reference to meaningfulness. The left-hand side of this slide shows that in 2021, we had $5.4 billion in benefits paid out while we were collecting $4.4 billion in contributions from employers and members. And really, the right-hand side that I'll speak to is referring to the benefits that have been paid out. OMERS commissioned research in 2021 to look at the social and economic value of OMERS to members and communities. The studies confirmed that the value brought by pension plans like OMERS extends beyond just the individual member, and it goes into the communities. For example, OMERS contributed about $12 billion to Ontario's 2020 GDP and supported about 118,000 jobs. OMERS directly impacts 1 in 20 Ontarians and 1 in every 11 households. Next slide, which is a continuation of the research, affirmed a strong association between pension plan participation and the enhanced sense of well-being, with increased financial security, better health, less stress being some of the values associated with the secure and stable income they receive from their OMERS pension. So OMERS pensions also provide retirees the opportunity to take an active role in the community through volunteering and charitable giving, which was outlined with many specifics in the detailed report. So next slide. We understand the value of OMERS for members and communities. The one thing we know, however, for certain about the future is it's unpredictable, as we well know, and of course, COVID is the best example. And we will need to continue to navigate through change and challenges. Pension plans, not just OMERS, but plans across Canada, across the world, are facing economic headwinds. Many are on our radar today, and there are likely risks that we will see in the next few years that we have no idea that's not even visible today. Again, COVID is an example of what occurred in the last 3 or 4 years. We don't know what those are, but we need to be able to deal with them if and when they arise. And that is the key to long-term success for our pension plan like OMERS. We have to be prepared. We have to be agile, monitor, assess, mitigate, and respond in an informed, measured, long-term manner. It's our goal to continue to deliver this value for the next 60 years and beyond. To do that, we need to manage growing demographic pressures that are facing many pension plans. We've talked about this over the years, but we're going to identify a little bit more specifics today. The 3 main drivers of these demographic pressures are increasing longevity, retirement of the baby boomer generation, and changes in the nature of employment. What do these pressures mean to the plan? It means OMERS pays out more pension payments, which needs additional funding. And it means we're going to have a lot more members receiving pensions they rely on for their retirement, which means a greater need for benefit security and a lower tolerance for funding and investment risk. As a result, OMERS will most likely be less able to tolerate and absorb future economic downturns. So we need, and I have to emphasize this, we need to prepare for this inevitability. This next slide is an important slide that I think it's the first time, Mr. Chair, we've presented this to you. We've talked about it verbally, but to me, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It provides the long-term lens on the maturing of our plan, those three pieces that I just spoke to. Essentially, the blue bars on this graph represent the dollars flowing into the plan, so the contributions. The green bars represent the outflows or the payment of benefits. The blue line represents the difference between these two. And as I outlined earlier, for 2021, we had $5.4 billion of payments and $4.4 billion of contributions, or what I would call a $1 billion operating annual deficit. What this is showing you is because of our maturity of the plan, our cash flow will continue to effectively be more negative relative to annual deficits, if you will. So in 2021, we have a $1 billion operating deficit. In 2035, we forecast that deficit will grow to $4 billion annually. And in 2045, the deficit will increase to about $7 billion. The result of these growth in benefit payments relative to contributions will mean that, generally speaking, we will need to earn about 1 to 2% a year in investment earnings simply to cover the annual operating deficit over and above the actuarial liability requirements. So as we mature, our risk grows, we're less able to manage downside economic events. So this is the key reason why we have a long-term risk assessment that's necessary today to prepare for the long term. Again, assessing and responding to new and emerging risks is an OMERS priority and a shared responsibility between both the AC board as well as the SC board. John spoke of the importance of diversification for investing in the plan assets and our efforts to address climate change. OMERS was a pioneer in moving toward private assets and diversifying away from complete reliance on volatile public markets. We were early movers in real estate classes like infrastructure and real estate, which are well positioned today to help address higher inflation while providing stable income and returns to help pay pensions in the years to come. So the key objective of the SC's plan risk assessment is to ensure that the plan design is sustainable both for members today and for future generations who will be counting on OMERS as their pension plan. I'd like to remind you of a few things in the short term in which OMERS has responded to changes and challenges in the last 2-3 years during COVID. We introduced plan changes to address specific issues that arose related to purchasing leave and layoff periods for credited services for staff, and last year we extended them as the pandemic continued. So this was across Ontario for all municipal staff, including, of course, Toronto staff. So we adjusted the plans to ensure the realities of COVID did not impact members. We're preparing to implement 2 new plan changes that were approved in 2020. First, an expansion of plan eligibility for non-full-time employees in response to the shifting nature of work, which you're well aware, and the shifting demographics of our membership. I know that Celine and her team have been working closely with City of Toronto, with Hatem and his staff, to assist and provide information on this important change for non-full-time members. Second, starting next year, there's a change to the rules about annual indexing applied to pensions. We refer to the rule change as shared risk indexing, or SRI for short. Why was this rule changed? Members and employers share in decisions about the plan and share the plan risks as well. To date, only active members have borne the member share of that risk. The introduction of a shared risk indexing option is meant to share the plan's risk across a larger portion of the membership as it matures with the pressures I showed you earlier. SRI provides OMERS with the option to adjust the level of inflation protection on benefits earned after December 31st, 2022, based on our annual assessment of the health of the plan. While SRI is a tool that may be used by OMERS to address funding issues in the future, a decision to grant less than 100% inflation would require a motion supported by 2/3 of the OMERS sponsors corporation. And there would be a discussion, needless to say, in deliberation, including dialogue with all sponsors and stakeholders, including the City of Toronto, before making any changes to benefits or contributions. So finally, to me, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Helping OMERS keep its promise to be a reliable foundation of retirement income for generations is at the heart of everything we do, as we outlined earlier. It's no easy task, though. We seek returns that can overcome the big risks OMERS contends with, including inflation, minimal membership growth, improving mortality, a slowing economy, pandemics, geopolitical armed conflict, the list goes on with the headwinds. While the ride is occasionally bumpy, our seatbelts are fastened. We have built and continue to build a portfolio, as John's covered, that we believe will help us manage these economic headwinds and future risks. We at OMERS have been delivering secure and stable pensions for 60 years. We're committed to that objective to make sure OMERS is sustainable, affordable, and meaningful today and for the next 60 years. Mr. Chair, that's our presentation. Apologies if it's been too lengthy for committee, but we're open to questions, both John and I, as well as staff.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Joe and John. And I appreciate all the information. No worries about the timeline. You know, this is very important. I think everybody on the committee and all of our employees that are members. So thank you very much for your time this morning and the presentations and the information. Are there any questions to the deputant by members of the committee? Sorry, I can't see everybody on the screen. Are there any questions of the deputants? Seeing none, I did have a couple. Joe, I just wanted to ask about the sponsor corps portion of the website. It hasn't been updated since 2020. Is that a COVID issue, or can we expect an update, the information on it updated soon?
You're through you, Mr. Chair, you are exactly right. We are updating the SC portion of the site, and that will be happening very shortly. We also have a new CEO, I think, as you're aware, and some changes that have occurred recently administratively, but we're right on that, and that'll happen very quickly.
Okay, all right. Thank you. John, welcome to General Government and Licensing Committee. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about some of your numbers. There was most recently, there was an asset liability study done, and I was wondering when the results were going to be posted on the AC website, or the next time, as well as the next time you and Joe are here, would you be able to talk about that study?
Yeah, I'm actually, Mr. Chair, I'm going to need some help from staff on this. I believe that the way those will ultimately be disclosed is in our investment policy and procedures document. Jonathan, can you speak to disclosure or the extent of disclosure around that?
Certainly, and good morning, everybody. So I'm Jonathan Simmons. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. As John says, the new asset mix has already been published within our statement of investment policies and procedures. It's actually the changes are actually quite subtle. So the formal discussion of them that people will see will be as OMERS produces more substantive disclosures. For example, the next annual report will include some more significant updates. I would say that the changes are quite subtle to the asset mix, and the main finding of the recent AL study is that the current asset mix target we have is very good, and by making some small changes, we can actually improve the profile going forward.
Okay, and is that a standard, sorry, Jonathan, like it's not posted on the website, is that a standard, you know, generally accepted accounting principle, or why is that difficult to find?
It's included in the SIP&P, which is on the website. But as I say, because the changes are quite subtle, we're waiting for our next big disclosure cycle to wrap them up there.
Okay, and do you know when is that going to take place?
We are reporting our mid-year results in August of this year.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. And then I don't know if this is a Jonathan question or a John question. The annual statistics for employee list, member affiliation, and employer categories, they haven't been updated on the AC portion of the website. When will that be happening?
Jonathan, is that, maybe that's a better question for Celine, actually. Celine Shivati's on the line as well. Celine, could you speak to that?
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We updated, again, we were just reviewing all of the numbers. We updated the information to get to the GG and LC committee specific to the City of Toronto. And so the full update of all the employer listings will be published this month.
Okay, thanks, Celine. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Mr. Chair.
And then back to Mr. Armstrong on slide number 9. You gave the 10-year return history, and I know the Teachers Pension Fund, they give a 30-year return. Is there something like that that could be looked at when you come here again?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, one of the challenges with comparing over time is the fund has evolved over time. I think as this committee is aware, there were significant contribution holidays taken around the turn of the century. So those longer dated horizons actually reflect, if you will, a somewhat different approach to our investing strategy. And so they may not be as comparable as what we are trying to do today and have accomplished over the last 10 years, and taking that funded ratio from 86% to 97%. And so if you think of the objective over that period of time, it really was both to generate returns, but importantly, to grow the asset base to a better funded position and make the plan stronger. Jonathan, I think if I'm not mistaken, we do have a 20-year return disclosed in the annual report, but perhaps you could correct me on that or confirm.
John, you're correct. That number is there and it's 7%.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then to both Joe and John, kind of one of my other areas of interest, and you alluded to in your slide presentation. So the AC board has a board of 15 and only has 4 women, and the sponsors board has a board of 14 and only 4 women. Are there any plans on balancing that out so there's a more equitable split between men and women on both boards? Do you have a strategy for both boards or goal? I know you compared it to the city, but I still, you know, you're nowhere near a 50-50 split on either board.
Yeah, so maybe I can kick off, and then Joe, please feel free to chime in. Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. I can tell you personally, diversity and inclusion is a passion of mine. I have 2 young daughters. I've worked in financial services my entire life, and I observed this as an issue all the way through, made it a mission of mine to mentor promising women throughout my career, and I'm deeply passionate about my daughters inheriting a different world in the future. I would also tell you that this is an area that the board is very focused on. You may have noted that we just added so Lori Hutchison moved into the CEO role at Sponsors Corp, as Joe just alluded to, and an additional woman was added to the board, Karen Figueredo, and I apologize to Karen if I'm not pronouncing her last name correctly, because she's only just been appointed and I haven't had the opportunity to meet her. But it's something that the board is very focused on, and I think perhaps even more important than just the board, it's something that's near and dear to the heart of our CEO, Blake Hutchison. And I would tell you that, you know, under his leadership, diversity and inclusion has really, in my mind, found a renewed focus. He's put together at the executive team, you know, and I'm relatively new to the board, but I have had an opportunity to spend time with the entire executive team. And I would tell you that this is an executive team that, in my mind, absolutely is representative of our broader community. He's brought representation of women at the senior level, as Joe alluded to 40%. Our workforce globally is now at 47% across OMERS as of the year end. Blake is also chair of our diversity and inclusion committee. So in terms of setting the tone at the top, he is demonstrating with his own commitment of time and energy that this is really important to him. He's refreshed our enterprise values this year for us. And I would just note that those are humility, integrity, excellence, and inclusion. So our four key values, inclusion is one of those. He's also been very involved in our Women in Leadership program. We're now on our second cohort of that. And I would tell you that in the first cohort, it was very successful. These programs across the industry tend to be very successful. 40% of the cohort were promoted post participating in that program. So it's a very successful program. The organization has also been recently certified by Divisio, which is a global standard around diversity and inclusion. And you receive that when your organization can demonstrate meaningful programs, policies, and measurements to advance diversity and inclusion at all levels of the organization, from the bottom to the top, and inclusive of the board of directors. So we're not at end of job by any means, as you alluded to, but it is absolutely an area that is getting significant focus within the organization, right up to the board level.
Okay, thank you, John.
And Mr. Chair, from the board point of view, so the stats that you see on that slide number 4, you know, very well represented to John's point on the management staff side, if you will. In terms of the boards, I'll be honest and say that, you know, the board, as I said in my remarks, both boards are so committed to inclusion and diversity and expanding that number relative to board appointees. Part of our problem, to be frank, is what the sponsors come forward with their recommendations for appointees. So we have to work with sponsors, and we're trying to, you know, be very clear to sponsors going forward, and even for the last 2 or 3 years, that diversity and inclusion is very important to what we would like to see on the board. Please consider that when you put forward names for appointees to the board. So that's something that, you know, is effectively a two-way street. We have to work with sponsors to try to up our representation. But our goal is the same as John has outlined relative to the staff side, to ensure that 27% for AC and 31% for SC grows in the future. And I'm pretty sure there are some changes happening in the next few years. I'm pretty sure you'll see that number increasing, I hope dramatically, Councillor.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else has any questions from the committee at this point. Seeing none, thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time and your work on behalf of the members from the City of Toronto, and looking forward to your next report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the committee members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Committee.
All right. I will move a motion to receive the report that was given to us this morning. And all in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Our next item is, sorry, I just lost my notes. Sorry, everybody will be. We're on to GL 31.15, long-term nominal license with the Toronto condominium numbers 2254 and 2598 at 208R Bloor Street West. We do have two speakers this morning. Our first speaker is Peter Djokovic from Tribute Communities, and then Nicholas Papatero from Plaza Partners. And I'd just like to tell both deputants, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, as I think the clerk has informed you. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Members of the committee have up to 5 minutes each to ask questions of you. And then we bring it back into what we call bring it back into committee, where we can ask questions of staff on this item and then speak to it individually as well. So our first deputant, Peter Djokovic, if you'd like to begin. Sorry, is Matthews the deputant available?
Yes, he is in the list. And he is unmuted. Peter, if you're there, you can speak.
Mr. Djokovic? Matthew, I'm not hearing anybody.
No. Okay, so we could try the next speaker. We're just moving that next speaker into the meeting.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Nicholas Papatero from Plaza Partners.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead. Do you have 5 minutes, sir?
Thank you. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Nicholas Papatero, and I'm the Director of Development with Plaza Partners, who are the owners of 2A Bloor Street West. I'm here today to speak about item 31.15, which is an application by condo number 2252 and 2598 for a long-term license over lands located immediately north of our property. Our property currently benefits from a right-of-way easement located on a portion of the land subject to the license application. This easement is critical for the current operation of our property as well as the future development of our property. Since March 2021, city staff have been reviewing our applications for OPA, ZBA, and SPA to permit the mixed-use intensification of our property. Unfortunately, we only became aware of the license application late last week, and were only able to speak to Councillor Layton yesterday morning regarding our concerns. Our concerns are that the proposed license does not make reference to our proposed easement rights, and also we are concerned that with our ability to proceed with the construction of our property should the long-term license be granted. We understand that staff have been asked to consider adding some language to the license that would allow for us to proceed with construction in the near future. And given the importance of Bloor Street, the Bloor Street corridor, we know it would be best to minimize any construction-related impacts to Bloor Street. In doing so, we would likely need to utilize a portion of the licensed lands for a period of time to allow for the safe and efficient development of our lands. So we're asking for staff to consider adding some language to the license agreement that would allow for us to have some conversations with staff in the future to consider utilizing some of those lands for construction-related purposes, and then until such time as our construction is complete, and perhaps a long-term license could be granted to the condo owners. I'm here I can answer any questions the committee may have, and I also have a sketch that I can show the committee should they want to see the proximity of the licensed lands to our property.
Okay. All right. So, sir, what the city staff have sent me what they would like to amend this morning. At the end below, in the first recommendation, they would like to include some wording around any additional terms related to adjacent site construction and access needs. And then they would also like to add City Council direct the Executive Director of Corporate Real Estate Management to engage with adjacent landowners to review short-term construction and access needs on any city-owned lands prior to entering into any longer-term license agreement for the property known municipally as 208R Bloor Street West. Would that wording accomplish what you would like to see to date?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Does anybody have any further questions of the deputy? Saying none, thank you very much for your time this morning, sir, and thank you very much for reaching out to us so we can resolve this. We always like to, as city councilors, like to support our business community in Toronto. It's very important to us, so thank you very much for your time this morning. I see no further deputants. Are there any questions of staff on this item?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we think that Peter, we might try Peter again. We thought he might
Oh,
have
okay,
called in.
all right.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of council. How are you today?
Morning, sir. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Sure, I appreciate the time. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I started speaking and realized that no one could hear me. Just to reiterate, and I won't need the full period of time, but to reiterate what my colleague at Plaza Corp was indicating, there are easements that are in place. We have access easements. We're looking at various options when it comes to construction-related matters. We were approved with OLT decision back in July of 2021. We're supportive of, public realm improvements, for the purpose of amenity. It's just a timing concern that's raised, as well as preservation of the easements, I think is kind of a requirement, right? So, and that wasn't within the body of the report. So to reiterate what was said, we're in lines with, I think, the amendment or the requested amendment that's being put forward as well. So I'm supportive of having that amendment approved.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time this morning, and we will now take this back into committee. Are there any questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the amendment.
Okay, Deputy Speaker Nunziata is moving the amendment. All in favor? And that carries. Our next item is sorry, GL
Mr. Chair?
30.1.
We would need to do the item
Matthew?
we just need to do the item as amended on item GL 31.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Item is amended. All in favor? And that carries. Our next item is GL 31.11 311 Toronto Annual Report for 2021. That was held by myself. Before I ask questions of staff, does anybody have any questions of staff? Seeing none. So is Mr. York available?
Oh, yes, I am.
Good morning, Gary. So I guess I want to thank you for all the work, and please pass on all the hard work during COVID to 311 staff. I can't speak for everybody, but I certainly can speak for myself that it is very much appreciated, and the response time and dealing with everything during COVID, if you could certainly pass that on to all of your staff in 311. But I would like to ask a question around for lack of a better word, I guess, city branding or trying to figure out. So the difficulty that I'm finding, Gary, as a city councillor, is if I send in a lot of requests to 311 and I get the SRO number back, and then I will get a response back from 311 saying, you know, it's going to be dealt with within 5 days. And then I get a generic response back saying, your item has been dealt with. And I get sometimes, some weeks, myself and my staff are so busy sending in requests to 311. I have no idea how to track these SROs and figure out which one I'm being told has been dealt with, other than to go back to writing things in a notebook and tracking it that way. And I'm wondering what can be done to remedy that.
Very fair question. I really do appreciate the question, Mr. Chair. I think in moving from good to great, we're working with our integrated service divisions that includes revenue services, MLS, animal services, Toronto Water, solid waste, and transportation. And we've started reconvening that particular committee to address this particular issue. It's not fair for us to ask you to trust us in regards to opting in for email notification and things of that nature. And then when you get the closed or root cause, it's 1 or 2 words. It doesn't build trust and confidence with the public. We do know that we have to do better in that area. We also know that from a technology perspective, we also have to align probably what our wants and our needs with the projects and initiatives that are also underway that are, competing for resources. So, for example, when we look at Maximo and EWMS and what that implicates, the implications that come along with that, that's the work order management system that allows you to put more robust updates into that particular tool that would then you'd be able to see, or the end user or the creator of that service request. In our case now, there's a limited amount of information that can be put into those fields. That doesn't mean we can't improve what we're doing. So we are working with the divisions, for example, working with transportation to increase that type of terminology that's being used versus just being dealt with. We want to at least have 5 or 6 letters or words that can actually articulate a better root cause versus just being closed or resolved.
Okay, and is there anything, Mr. York, that this committee could do to assist you, I guess, and for lack of a better word, in changing that behavior or getting all of the departments to get on board with what we really need to do to make the 311 system, I know, the premier customer service portal that it can be?
Mr. Chair, very great question. And I think, first of all, even having this conversation, this dialogue in this format helps us a lot. If you want to talk offline about creating emotions that also stimulate this in terms of sense of urgency, that would also be appreciated as well.
Okay. Is that something you would like to do, we can have ready for City Council?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Okay, perfect. All right. And thank you, Gary. And once again, to all of your staff, really appreciating the work. And, the 311 app, I will promote it again here. Finding it very useful, very easy to use. I've had very positive feedback from the community as well. So thank you very much for all of your work and your leadership.
Thank you very much. And I just always want to reinforce, it's not just 301, it's the integrated service divisions and their partnership. So we can't do this alone. It's all the other leaders that want to make sure that we're a world-class organization. So thank you very much for the kind words, and I'll definitely share it with our partners and with our team.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
does anybody else have any?
I had
Deputy
a
Mayor
question.
Holiday,
Yeah, I had
questions
a
of staff?
question for Mr. York, if that's okay. I think it's a quick one.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. York, I like Councillor Ainsley, recognize the big help that the new 311 app and the various access channels to 311 create, especially being able to email in an issue. And I just wondered if you've embarked on a campaign that, sort of promotes skip the wait, and maybe use bus shelters or other things like the advertising spaces to get people to use the app, because that's a common concern I get, especially after a storm or, a snow event or something like that, where people say, I had to wait on hold for a long time. said, well, sure, because, everybody and their brother in the city is calling in at the same time. But did you know you could email in your concern, or you can download the app and you don't have to wait at all. You can get it right into the queue. And I just wondered if we had tried to promote that, especially with the advertising assets that we've got.
Through the chair, Councillor or Deputy Mayor, I think that's a fantastic question. We've been able to generate already a trend in regards to, there's almost in Q1 of this year, there's a decrease of about 16% overall in terms of calls, and service requests and online activity has gone up tremendously. And that's without a commitment around change management. And we are looking to look at strategic communications and some other resources to be proactive and purposeful in our thoughts and movements going forward. But we also have to take into account budget, because that does cost money and time, and we have to prioritize as well. So we're looking for some assistance on that as well. But very, very good question. And we do need to be methodical and purposeful in terms of that going forward. And you will see a change in dedication to that in the very near future.
Do you have access to the bus shelter advertising space when you're ready?
Through the chair, well, I'll work with strategic communications. I do think we do. We've talked about some strategies already, and we're actually meeting in the next 5 to 10 days around looking at options, and we've allocated some resources already to look at that particular opportunity. So it's not something that we haven't missed. We just want to make sure we crawl, walk, and run. One is understanding the tool and some of the trends and nuances, and then two is making purposeful attempts and resource allocation to drive change in behaviors and in culture.
Thank you, Mr. York.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. Matthew, sorry, to the city clerk, just on a point of clarification. So if we approve the recommendation, which is before us today for information, does this report still appear before our next city council meeting for information?
No.
So I would like to move a motion in conjunction with Mr. York, but I want to make sure it gets done in this cycle.
Currently, the recommendation is that this committee receive the report for information. If you'd like to make a recommendation, the committee can make a recommendation to City Council by motion on the item. If that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so my goal is I don't think Mr. York and I are going to get a motion that I think is necessary this morning. So I guess this would go to City Council without recommendations.
Yep, Mr. Chair, the committee can forward this item to City Council without recommendation.
Okay, so I guess that's the motion that I would like to put forward, so I could work on what I need to with Mr. York.
Okay, you can take that vote. We understand that you are taking a vote to forward this item to City Council without recommendation.
Perfect. Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor? Okay, and that passes. Our next item, sorry, my apologies, is GL 31.16, update on the Jane Finch Community Hub and Center for the Arts and additional terms for the city's acquisition of a portion of 2050 Finch Avenue for Metrolinx in Ward 7. I understand Councillor Peruzza, one of our fellow councillors, but not on the committee, would like to speak to this item. Councillor Peruzza, are you available? Councillor Peruzza? There he is. We can't hear you, Councillor.
No, I understand that.
Try again. There you go.
Oh, there it is. Perfect. Well, Mr. Chair, it was my understanding that there would be some deputants on this matter. Are there none registered that you know of? Or none are in the room?
There's no deputants registered. No.
No? So then, Mr. Chair, I will speak to this briefly in the absence of that. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the staff involved in the production of this report, but more importantly, in all of the work that has been done to date in acquiring this site at the corner of Yorkgate and Finch. It's a site defined in the report in an attachment. I believe it's attachment A. It consists of the lands that front the maintenance and storage facility along Finch Avenue between North Finch and Yorkgate Boulevard. It's a site that's defined there. It's about 2.5 acres of land. Mr. Speaker, this issue goes back some ways, back when the original Finch LRT line was announced in 2008, 2009, when our real estate folks began to explore sort of the feasibility of acquiring a site along the Finch Avenue route for its maintenance and storage facility for the cars that would eventually serve the line. They looked all over and they eventually landed on this particular site. And one of the reasons was because this site was also close to Jane Street. And at that time, if folks will recall, the original Transit City Plan had an LRT line on Jane Street as well. So there was one on Finch and one on Jane, and this site made sense. But one of the commitments that was made early on by our real estate folks here, as well as the TTC, which was in the which was the entity that would be building would be responsible for the development of the then Transit City Plan. One of the early commitments was that there would be a site, a significant community benefit for the neighborhood here, and in the form of a hub/future community center. At that time, a drawing was produced because the TTC also, to some degree, laid out to see if the site would be conducive to a maintenance and storage facility. Sort of a site plan was produced, and the then community center was located actually on Yorkgate Boulevard. We all know the history of this project. It's been on a bit of a roller coaster ride ever since. It kind of went up and then it went down because there were changes in administration, but to some degree it survived a number of folks. So it started when David Miller was the mayor, lived through the Ford era, and now is taken off under the Tory regime as mayor, and Doug Ford as Premier of Ontario. And there have been a number of significant community members that have come on board in terms of developing the concept and the idea of a community center / hub, initially known as CAPG, later transformed. Currently, it's in the form of an organizing committee. The report speaks to that. So while I thanked all of the staff here for all of the work that they have done in bringing this forward, I've omitted a few people that should be recognized and thanked as well. And principally, they are our mayor, John Tory, for his support and his backing of this particular site when it became somewhat complicated to get. He recognized quickly the importance of this initiative to the neighborhood and the community, and was very, very supportive. And he threw his weight behind the project and the getting these lands from the province and the provincial government. I also want to thank the current Premier, Doug Ford, and the minister, who was then responsible for this. I don't know if she'll be the new minister going forward, but she should be recognized, Minister Mulrooney, and clearly the Premier, Premier Doug Ford, and thanking them for making this possible, and recognizing the wisdom of this particular investment from a provincial perspective in this community, in this neighborhood, how important it is to the fabric of, a build back better for the neighborhood. Why a hub like this and an initiative like this would be so important and such an inspirational initiative for the neighborhood. So it started a long time ago. It's gotten to the point where the City of Toronto is in the process of acquiring these lands, and there have been a number of very significant supporters and players along the way. And I also lastly want to thank another group of people. There was a group of people that used to live grew up in the Jane Finch neighborhood and moved away. But when when this project, got into trouble, they were all very supportive and reactivated themselves wherever they're living in Ontario and Canada and abroad, in supporting in making noise in supporting this project. So we got media support from a number of media and a number of journalists, also in recognizing the importance of this initiative, and everyone else. And I just want to thank them all, because as the counselor for this neighborhood, really this is a signature project for all of us, and there is so much hope basically built around it and connected to it, that I can't stop gushing at the project, and what the potential project will be and will entail, and what it will mean for all of us and all of those folks who have lent their support in getting us to this point in this. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to say a few words on this morning. I hope I haven't overextended my stay here, but I just want to let you all know this is a very, very important thing for all of us, and I hope that the committee will give it a unanimous backing this morning and punt the ball forward. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Perruzza. It's always a pleasure to have you at General Government Licensing, and I want to thank you for all of your work on behalf of your community on what's going to be a very amazing community hub and center for the arts. And I can't speak for all of the committee members, but I certainly look forward to a ribbon cutting and groundbreaking when it does take place. So we do have the recommendation before us this morning. I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this item.
Mr. Chair, this is a recorded vote on item GL 31.16. All in favor? Chair Ainsley, Councillor Fillion, Councillor Matlow, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Mr. Chair, that is 4 in favor. There are no other members present here.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to have it noted in the minutes that the recorded vote was unanimous on this item. Thank you very much, everyone. Our next item is GL 31.17, update on improvements to public notices. We have one registered deputant, Mr. Miroslav Glavich. Mr. Glavich, are you available?
Mr. Chair, we don't see that name connected to the meeting here, and further within the chamber, we don't see anyone who's come to speak with us here. We don't believe that the speaker is present.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of staff on this item?
Mr. Chair, I do. Stephen Holliday.
Deputy Mayor Holliday, questions of staff, go ahead.
Thank you. I understand someone from MLS and perhaps somebody from planning is available. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Carlton and Greg are both here.
Thank you. Thank you to you both for joining the meeting. I'll keep my question pretty quick. During the pandemic, I came across a situation where a developer was looking at installing some signs that would complement the city's posted sign, flagging that, hey, this is a new development, here's the QR code, the web link if you want to go look it up, and kind of a block rendering of the building. And the idea was that they could put some renderings and maybe some basic floor plans. And I understand that that's not really allowed under our signs bylaw. Is that correct?
I'll defer that to Greg, City Planner.
Thanks, Carlton. Deputy Mayor, it's Greg Kwinter. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely, yes.
With respect to the development signs that you see on sites, they are exempt from the city's sign bylaw. And we put up a sign, as you know, which was totally refreshed and reformatted in 2015. Contains links to the city's application information center, information of who to contact about the development, a graphic rendering, a generic graphic rendering of the development. Also, there is information on the sign that is affixed later when we get closer to an approval. Statutory meeting where an approval may be considered and the developer must affix a notice of that date and time. So all of that information and some more basic information is on that sign. And again, it's exempt from the sign bylaw.
But if a developer put their own up, even if they're trying to be helpful, they wouldn't be exempt because the city sign is the city sign. We exempt ourselves. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So any other sign would be subject to the sign bylaw.
Now, there's a difference between a sign that would be marketing material or, hey, coming soon, we're going to build this or that. Do you think there might be an opportunity for a developer in the spirit of what we're talking about with this report and trying to get more accessibility for people to get information about an application? Could we take a look at maybe creating that opportunity with reasonable limitations? Like, we don't want to have billboards and big things there, but if a developer wanted to put up the floor plans from the application or an elevation or some kind of rendering, and not it's something that you'd be seeing if you're driving by, but if you wanted to walk up to the board, you could learn a little bit about the application. Could we take a look at that to see if that would be reasonable?
I mean, we could certainly take a look at it. I believe the enhancement that we made in 2015 and thereafter, and we're continuing to enhance the sign. For example, we're going to be adding a QR code to the sign. But I believe what we provide now is a fair and equitable representation, at least from the city's perspective of what City Council is considering in the application. And I would have to, seriously take away your idea and consider the implications of it further.
For sure.
And we could report on that, but I would want to assess, various perspectives on how that might change the playing field, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I had, but I did see, I think, another committee member there raising their hand. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Other questions of staff on this item? Councillor Filion?
Yes, in response to Councillor Holiday's suggestion, might doing something like including the floor plans create an impression that the city is in some way promoting this project, and might it create a further impression that the city is somehow endorsing the project by providing that level of what could be considered marketing information?
So through the chair, that might be one of my concerns, Councillor, and that's why we have a link to the Application Information Center, because there people can see exactly what you see and what the world sees, which is all the information that's been supplied to the city through the Application Information Center is posted. So all of the reports and plans and drawings are there. So for someone who wants to avail themselves of the floor plans, they can go through the Application Information Center, they can look at the applicant's drawings, they can look at their studies and everything else they're interested in. It's all in one spot. And we will enhance that because we're looking at the QR code as another means to facilitate access to that information.
Yes, thank you. And if Councillor Holiday moves a motion, I'd like to speak to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Filion. Councillor Matlow, I saw your hands.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is a question perhaps more geared to Carlson, but it's admittedly adjacent to sort of I think the relative success of the new form of the notice, which really is far more modern and engaging than the old one. What is the responsibility of the property owner once it's been up there, and it's been up there for a while, and it's been up there for even longer than a while, and then little bits of it keep falling off, and graffiti appears on it, and various weird things have been written on it? What is the responsibility of the property owner to keep it in reasonable maintenance so that it doesn't start blemishing on the public space?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Matlow. You're correct. It is the property owner's responsibility to maintain the sign in good maintenance, free of litter, graffiti. It needs to be maintained, and failure to maintain would result in, I guess, a property standards order advising them to maintain it properly.
So there's a few of them around the city, and I can think of right now a couple even in my own community. And we've shared with staff several times that we have concerns about just how awful the condition that they're in is, and nothing's been done about it. Could you advise, like, what do we do when we're sort of in that place where it's just, your shop might have told them to do something, they may or may not ignore you? Like, what do you do?
No, great question. I think this is something that I would take away as an undertaking to understand and to work with Greg and his team on, how long these signs are meant to be there. I in my neighborhood as well. You see them, and they've been here for 5 years, and nothing's happened. So, is there a?
Can we just go and rip them off and replace them on our own if we just deem it to be helpful to the neighborhood? I mean,
again, I don't know if we have the authority to remove and dispose. Our objective is typically to work with the property owner to bring them into compliance. If they were unsafe, it maybe it's something that we would look at.
Okay, perhaps I'll follow up with you, but as you just mentioned, this is an ongoing issue that we just need to address a little better. So thanks.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Other questions on this item? Seeing none, to staff, in the report, it says, on the very first page in the summary, the last paragraph, the city manager's current review of the city's public engagement strategies may result in additional recommendations on potential measures to enhance public notices along with other forms of engagement. And I'm not sure who wants to answer, how do we find out if it does result in additional forms of engagement? Will there be a report back to this committee?
Mr. Chair, this is Rich Waite from the City Manager's Office. I can speak to that if you.
I would.
We are our public engagement review, which we're conducting now out of our office with a number of divisions, will be reporting back to council. We're anticipating and to divisions in sort of the beginning of 2023, with what we've heard from community on a range of ways to improve engagement. And questions like this, like signage and opportunities, are coming up in the conversations we're having with the public and groups. So that's why that report signals that we'll probably have more input from the public on what would be helpful, that we can share with divisions and consider recommendations in our report.
Okay, and how are you engaging the public to improve engagement strategies?
Yes, Councillor, it's a bit of a meta conversation. We have been having a number of conversations internally with divisions on the types of what they've heard to date about how engagement works well and doesn't. That and also working with community groups and organizations on some kind of fact finding. That's resulting in some surveys and kind of surveys which we anticipate launching in the coming weeks to the public and to organizations to ask people more about what they expect from engagement, what their experience has been, and to comment on some of the barriers that we've heard. We'll be following up that with some internal reviews of what the public and organizations tell us. We'll dive deep again with divisions on solutions. So we're trying to invite people to have a conversation about participation, and then really layering on what divisions already know to some extent, or what we hear about what works and what doesn't, in order to recommend back to divisions and councils some opportunities.
Okay, and will you be reaching out to city councillors to engage us, for lack of a better word, so we can make sure our residents are aware of this process and they can be engaged? And
Yes, Councillor. We'll be sending along through Councillor's staff to answer short surveys and meet with us to talk about your experiences and what you've heard.
okay, and I don't know. So, Rich, are you? I see your profile picture. Are you? Can you see me if I hold up a newspaper advertisement?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here. I'm on camera now, but
Okay.
yes.
So my next question, Rich, and I don't know. So I still read, I'm sure Four Star will be happy to hear this. I still read their newspaper daily, and I read the Globe and Mail. And I don't know if everybody can see this. So this is one of many placed advertisements in the Toronto Star today about this one is notice of a public meeting to request request to amend the zoning bylaw application. There's a number and there's a whole lot of information in it with a diagram for an application on Mount Pleasant. I can barely read any of the information on the map that comes with it. Is this type of application, is this design our responsibility, or is this something that the Planning Act requires us to do? Because I can tell you for this one, for example, it was on the left side of a page, and I was more drawn to the color picture of the baseball player on the accompanying page than I ever was to look at this, or I think there were 6 of them in the Toronto Star today. So I guess I'm asking is who's responsible for this, ultimately the content and design of this?
I think you signaled that you're asking me that. I think I might defer to the chief planner on that one.
Councillor, it's Greg Lintern. It's a combination of city legal, city clerks. The content is largely mandated by the Planning Act and legal considerations, and I'll acknowledge that it's exceedingly dry and legalistic, but we take a different approach, obviously, with community consultation engagement and other forms of engagement that we do. But when it gets down to the actual statutory notices, they must meet various standards and guidelines that are set out in law and mandated. And at this time, with the end of the term, there are going to be, I believe, about 60 notices like that in the newspapers in the next. They started last week, and we're going through quite a flurry of them right now. So you will notice them much more than you probably regularly notice them.
Okay, but so is there something that we can do within this process to make them more inviting, more attractive to read? I know there's a flurry of them, Greg, but this has been brought up before. They're boring. Like they're not attractive at all. I give them a quick glance in this box to make sure the address isn't on my ward. and then I move on. And I know, as a city councillor, I might, I give them a glance, but as a general member of the public, I have no interest. I would have no interest. I would just, as I said, I was more interested in the color picture of the baseball player on the opposite page. That caught my eye first, as opposed to this. So have we ever reached out to the province to say, what can we do to upgrade statutory notices? Because I think, when I got to City Hall in 1999, we were using the same format, and that format's never changed.
Well, Councillor, I don't disagree with you, and it's probably more appropriate that we take away your issue and think about how we might be able to address it, because over the years, certainly have made the same comments, and the minimum legal requirements and clerk's requirements have always been a bit of a trump card when it comes to design. And but we certainly take it away and run back up that hill once more. I see Brad is on the call. I don't know if he wants to add anything to this conversation, or City Legal.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I think the only thing I would add, and I think you noted it, is these are statutory ads that you're referring to, Councillor, that are mandated and legislated, but it is not the only. I think there are certainly myriad ways, and Rich and his team are looking at them in ways of engaging with the public in other forms beyond the statutory ads, which are very prescriptive in terms of it must be in an English language daily newspaper. So in today's information world, that is fairly limiting. Of course, they're also posted on our website.
All right, thank you, Councillor Fillion. I saw your hand again.
Just a question kind of related to your point, Mr. Chair. I mean, I would rather watch a speck of dust on my wall than read one of those ads. So I'm just wondering, like, is everything that's in there legally required? Like, it has to be written exactly that way, in that many words, or is just some of it required to be done that way?
Through the chair, I don't know if City Legal is on the call or at the meeting, but really it's a great question, and it's probably more appropriately directed at City Legal.
And I can confirm that I'm here, and the language is very carefully tied to the minimum requirements of each of the notice provisions. So there is very limited opportunity to modify the content that is provided in each of those legally mandated notices. And as that, as was pointed out previously, this is not the only way that information can be provided to the public on those matters. This is just the way that the law requires it to be provided. So there can be additional notices or information provided in other means.
Sure, I know. I'm just wondering if, like, for example, Auditor General, in her reports, which can be, long and actually aren't that difficult to read, but, fairly tedious read because they're long and complicated. She'll do like a one-pager that, that anybody could read and get the gist of it. It just seemed, when we're taking out an ad that big, it just seems a shame not to provide information in any usable format. Who pays for those ads?
That production is covered in the cost of the application, I believe, Councillor Fillion. The actual the actual purchase is covered in the cost of the application, I believe.
Would that be part of the application we have to give back if, with the new provincial regulations, if we don't get our reports in within 3 months?
I haven't thought of that, but you're probably correct.
Yeah, I need to have a look at that too.
I think if I could just comment on your other comment, that it's possible that we could supplement the dry legalistic ad with something that's a little more user-friendly. And that would be an additional buy, obviously, but I think we can take that away to consider how we might be able to do that.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to do anything that would raise our cost. I'm just wondering, you know, when you have an ad that big, if you can remove, you know, 15% of what's in it because it's not absolutely legally required, and place that 15% with something that somebody could understand, that would be revenue neutral and helpful. But I'll leave that for you to look at.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Filion. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item? Councillor Matlow?
To speak.
Well, thank you to all the staff who spoke to the item today and answered our questions. I brought a motion to council in 2015 to re-engage us on, you know, in the conversation about how to improve public notices when it comes to development applications. And a lot of the motivation for that new look was because of the work of Dave Meslin and his peers, who are just so creative and constantly challenge us to think differently. And like the old notices were just so dry. Like, there's no color. There's, you know, just the way it was worded, it was just kind of similar to these ads that Councillor Ainsley showed us. And the new notices that we see on the buildings now are far better. I mean, can they be improved? Always, but they're far better than they used to be before 2015. I suggested that we not get too fixated on, you know, the legal requirement for putting these notices out in English language newspapers. That is an archaic prescription. Hopefully that'll change eventually by the province. That is not the only way that people get information anymore. That shouldn't be our singular focus. And you know, people live in the neighborhoods, people live on Facebook, people live on Twitter, people live on Nextdoor, people live in various places virtually and in real life all over the place. And I think our planning staff have been really creative in recent years to do pop-up events when it comes to secondary plan reviews and other types of initiatives where they've shown up at subway stations, farmers markets, and anywhere else they can find people to engage them in these conversations. So I must say I'm less interested in sort of pumping up the language that we use in the newspaper ads, and more interested in constantly rethinking how we engage people almost everywhere else. And I really appreciate the fact that our staff are engaged in this discussion, because ultimately that's how we have intelligent and informed conversations in our communities about the right type of development. And I would go a step further, and I'll conclude on this thought, that if we only engage people based on the prescription that we need to give them a notice about what is being proposed as far as the height and the density and the basic details, we don't provoke a conversation that is more about how do you build community. So I think the more that we can, and I know it's a lot of words in a small space, but the more that we can engage people, as planning already has begun to, about what kind of communities do we want to build? How do these buildings fit into that plan? How do they contribute to leaving the place better than they found it, rather than just, here we have to fight another one? I think it'll be a more intelligent conversation with better outcomes. And I'm not suggesting you put all that onto one notice board or a little ad in the Star, but in many ways that they're already doing it with these pop-up events and community meetings, etc. I think there are ways to do it that we can engage a more thoughtful and an interesting and intelligent and helpful conversation about building communities. Anyway, I want to just thank everybody for their focus on this, because again, if you remember how it was years ago, those notices that we used to put up were just dreadful. And I think we have made some improvements, but there's a lot more work to do.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Other speakers on this item? I believe Deputy Mayor Holliday, you had a motion you wanted to move?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask the clerk to present that, and I'll just talk about it a little bit. So it's the committee to ask the chief planner in consultation with MLS and the chief building official to consider opportunities to let a development applicant install a public information sign with reasonable limitations in conjunction with the development application to assist with public information and the consultation process pursuant to the Planning Act. And something which does not contain sales or marketing information, and if there's any changes, report to us. I'd offer the following comments. I received a lot of feedback from people regarding changes to the public meetings that we had during the pandemic. And one of the pieces that I've always remembered was a repeated focus on the signs. And the chief planner talked about it. We've improved those. We've improved the design of those, and they're helpful. But I found over and over again, people said, you know, I noticed this because of the sign. I'd love to have a little bit more information. Not everybody is going to go to the application information center. Not everybody is going to weed through all of the files that are installed on there. Not even everybody has the capability of doing that. So the thinking was, could another information board be put up? You know, is it the city that does it? Is it the applicant? Actually, it's the applicant that does both, as far as I know. Those application signs, even though they have the City of Toronto's logo and the graphics that are set, they're still installed by the applicant because it's part of the process. And, you know, I thought, could we push the envelope on that a little bit more and get people a bit more information? And that's so when they're out for a walk, when they see the sign, they could actually go up to it and take a closer look. And I don't know if it's a backside of the sign that you could have a little more, or a second board. So the proposal I just put before the committee is pretty broad, and it's non-binding or confining because, you know, I recognize there is a slope and a practical tipping point. You don't want to open the door to have applicants put all sorts of things out there. Maybe it's limited to things that are already on the application information center. And you certainly don't want it to be a sales and marketing sign, because that's not the intent, right? To start to advertise the development. But just to go back to that principle, having something tangible out in front of you gives you a chance to understand a little bit more about the application, I thought could be helpful. There's only so much you can fit on the standard sign that we've got today. And so this is just simply an ask to take a look. And if it turns out to be not practical and too many risks, I'm satisfied with that. But what I did want to do was challenge staff of the city to take a good look to see if we can improve the signs, because I really have heard that they are valuable and they do draw people's attention to something that's going on in the neighborhood. Far better than we can do with anything on a website or even a piece of paper that gets mailed out. So I hope you'll consider that. And if there's something in there that you want to speak to or are concerned with, you know, I'm open to amendments, but I just love to have the staff take a look and let us know what they think about the practicality of having a little bit more. Thank you.
Councillor Fillion, did you have questions of the speaker, the mover?
No, I'll just speak to it.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm, you know, quite opposed to this. I'm sure Councillor Holliday's intentions are good, but they are perhaps naive. As someone who has dealt with hundreds and hundreds of development files and community meetings over the years, I don't think I've ever seen one presented neutrally by an applicant. They, you know, you can't say, no, that, you know, that picture you just showed is incorrect or false, but, you know, I've just any artists out there who would like to work with me on a project that would compare developers' renderings of what their project will look like and then take a picture of it after it's built. I think we all know they bear little resemblance to one another. So, you know, for example, with Councillor Holiday's suggestion, someone will show, would want to show, in the interest of providing the public with information, a architectural rendering of their project, which will be gleaming in the sun, which will have pedestrians galore, no cars in it, you know, nice trees that either may or may not exist. If they do, it'll be 20 years from now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, taken from an angle where, you know, it looks like it's not a big building. You know, it just, you know, we've all seen those. Are they factually incorrect? No. Are they misleading? Very much so. And is that, you know, how does that help the process? It's a kind of thing that developers, you know, want to slap up on their hoarding to try to sell their projects. And, you know, I certainly do not want us opening the door to that kind of thing. You know, anything that we're putting out should either be, you know, completely neutral, prepared by staff, or very prescribed. Not, you know, we don't want to waste. We already don't have enough planners' time to process applications. We do not want people having to evaluate developers' renderings to see, you know, whether they're okay to stick on a sign or not. Also, something that I know that is, you know, almost always a problem is the perception by some of the people who attend a community meeting that the city is somehow putting this project forward or endorsing it. And I think it would only add to that perception to have any additional material provided by the applicant on a separate sign. So I'm just very much opposed to us even spending time considering this, and would like a recorded vote on it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Filion. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, I think that's everybody. So
Chair, on a
two
point of order?
motions. Deputy Mayor Holiday?
Yeah, I mean, I should know the procedure well enough to tell you whether I can do this or not, but I did take some of Councillor Filion's comments, you know, respect the wisdom, and I added a couple of words. I sent an amendment to my own motion, which, you know, I don't know if that'll change the vote, but it did contain the words and content approval as one of the conditions, right? So that, you know, perhaps there's an extra loop in that we can ensure that the content is approved. Again, back to the staff to consider it. So, you know, I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow that amendment and take the vote. But I thought that was an improvement based on the comments from Councillor Filion.
Councillor Ainsley, Chair, rather, may I ask a question of the mover? I should have asked this before, but just a quick one. Councillor Holiday, given that the whole point of the notices are about, it's not about what the developer wants, it's about what we as a city want to convey to residents to engage them in the conversation about the future of their community. Why, you know, you consider perhaps just removing this motion for now and having a conversation with Greg Lintern before moving forward with any of these ideas in a formal way, because, you know, there's already, we're already having a conversation. That's the whole point of this item, right? About how to further improve what we're asking developers to put up on our collective public behalf. Why would we go further to say, you know, let the developer lead that and then come to us to see if it's okay? Like, would you consider just maybe pulling back from the motion for now and we can kind of pick this up as far as, you know, moving forward with the initiative we already have on the floor?
Yeah, I know I've expressed these ideas before to staff, and again, you know, the report came to us in GGLC here, and I would just simply like to get more content displayed. You know, I don't necessarily want to prescribe a whole bunch of work to throw onto staff shoulders. You know, but I take the point that there needs to be some controls. But I would say this. I mean, part of my comments were, you know, maybe it's stuff that comes out of the portal that's placed online, right? You know, an applicant has to file their plans or their site plan or even their renderings as part of that process. So, you know, it's available to the public anyways. And, you know, I'm not going to get into the weeds of whether we put the City of Toronto branded logo on it or not. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. I just like them to take a look because I find the one single block rendering and the couple of site stats is just not enough to convey what's being proposed on site. And I really do mean it, that I don't think everybody goes through the process of going online and unpacking what the application is. So if we could just get a little bit more information out there, whether you call it a sign or an information board, I think there's value in doing that. I've tried to leave the language really high level in the motion to give staff complete latitude. And maybe they come back and say, look, we don't want to do this. That's fine. But I'd still love to ask the question and challenge the process a little bit, because I think we can do better with what we put out there for the public.
Councillor Holiday, I hope that you will consider, and if you can, you know, if you bring this back, that we as a city, on behalf of the public, completely have it within our ability to improve upon and expand upon the information that we are asking to be provided. I think the concerns you're hearing from Councillor Fillion and myself and perhaps others is about empowering the developer, the applicant themselves, to lead that conversation about the information that they would select to provide, and then make work for our staff to have to review it afterwards. So I think that is the only difference in our views. Anyway, so I suggest that to you.
Yeah, so to respond to that, look, I'm quite open if you want to suggest an amendment to the language that takes the word the applicant off of it and puts it back on the staff shoulders to consider expanded information. It's only leading to the same thing. You know, I've read the process that the developer is the one that has to put up the sign. So you know, I assumed it's all the same people working on it, but if that would make the committee members feel more comfortable that, you know, because that's certainly not the intention that I give, you know, free reign for marketing by developers. It's about getting the information that's formally in the file, right?
Yeah, they only post the sign. We're the ones who come up with the wording, the information. So I don't know what to suggest. I mean, this to reword this right now would take a little work. Chair, what would you suggest?
So Deputy Mayor Holiday can either amend it. I'm fine now with giving some flexibility to amend it now so that everybody's happy.
I can take a kick at it. Or so to consider opportunities to allow enhanced public information. Just take out the words "to allow a development applicant," and just say consider opportunities for enhanced public information signs with reasonable limitations to assist with public information and consultation process. And you know, we can even, at that point, we could take out sales or marketing information and report to 2023 with any necessary changes to the bylaw. You know, I can leave it at enhanced public information signs.
What do you think, John?
Well, if it's just, you know, it is hard rewording it on the fly. I mean, you have to take most of the words that are in there out and just ask the chief planner if he wants to consider ways to provide the public with more factual information about development applications on public notices. If it's something like that, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too. I mean, it's all about the end product. I'm less fussed about who who installs it and who approves it. And what I'll basically do is just take the last section of the last several lines off of that paragraph.
Is that agreeable to everyone?
Yeah, and thank you, Stephen, for your openness.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you to my
sure,
colleagues
likewise.
for getting this to a point that we can all work with it.
Matthew, did you capture all of that?
Mr. Chair, we are working with Deputy Mayor Holliday just to make his edits right now.
And probably
All right,
have that in
thank you.
about 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, on a point of order that's been revised here to take most of the end of it back and just leave it at enhanced public information signs. I'm going to take it that, you know, the chief planner and the others on the call today would be familiar with the intent of the motion and what I'm trying to achieve with more information. So if that's acceptable to the committee, you know, I'm good with that as well.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if it could read, Stephen, to consider opportunities to provide, you know, more or better information to the public on development information signs.
I'm
rather
satisfied
than,
with that
I don't
too.
know, because I'm not sure what enhanced, you know, that could mean a lot of things.
And may I also add the word in development application? Rather than just development.
Matthew, did you get that? Or Steve, Deputy Mayor Holliday, are you okay with that? Those amendments?
Certainly. Yep. I think the clerk has refreshed the wording.
Yep. I see that on my screen. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep, sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your work on that, Matthew. And then I have two motions that I would like to move. Matthew, do you have both of them?
I believe we've combined them into one. When we take a look.
Oh, okay. I can have that on the screen then. So the motion I'm moving, so two motions got moved into one. It's basically directing the city manager to contact the appropriate provincial government to explore options for modifying and enhancing statutory notices. I did raise the point earlier of the newspaper advertisements, which people have been complaining about for a long time. And I know a lot of people have been trying to do a lot of work. Councillor Matlow mentioned Dave Meslin, who I think appeared before this committee in its previous version of general government back when Mayor Ford was in office, and brought forward a number of different examples. And staff have mentioned that there's an obligation that we have to fulfill by guidance that we get from the province, which I think needs to change. And it's not just about newspaper advertisements. You know, not everybody reads the newspaper anymore. A lot of people get their information from any number of different social media platforms. So I think there's an amazing opportunity there to be utilized, but I think that needs to be looked at. And then the last part of the motion really is just a reporting mechanism, because when I asked staff about when they were going to be reviewing the strategies resulting in additional recommendations, and they said it would probably go to council in the first quarter of 2023. Well, as we come out of COVID, while we didn't have any deputations on this item today, I know there is a great level of interest out there in how to make municipal government better and achieve more results, be more community oriented. So as those recommendations come forward, I would like to see them back at general government and licensing, so there is an opportunity for the public to comment on them in a much more meaningful manner than you would get if it was just a report going directly to City Council. So that's my motion, and I hope everybody can support it. And seeing that, so we have two motions. The first one from Deputy Mayor Holiday. All in favor? That carries. The motion by myself, all in favor? That carries. Item is amended. All in favor? That carries. Matthew, I believe we're done.
That is correct. You've completed your agenda.
All right. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate everybody's work and input, both on members of the committee, staff, and people that took time to depute today. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.